an eye out for them, and we'll interrupt again.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for the great introduction. I'm really grateful to be here today, and thanks so much for joining. If it's your lunch hour or taking time out of your busy day, I think the overview is great, but there's probably the story behind the story. From LinkedIn. One of the first startups I was with, Direct Hit, we actually sold for $500 million to Ask Jeeves in the internet boom, and luckily hit the timing right. Moved from there to Intuit Innovation Labs, and really got a sense for what it really is to solve deep pains and deep needs, and bring that to a market level. And went from there to a startup. It was almost a startup incubator. People would start up startups after Intuit Innovation Labs, but worked for a company, Exit 41. We had 30 million in investments, and we were featured in the book The World is Flat, if many of you know that, but it ended up being a technology sale. And if folks know what that terminology means, it's not great for investors to have those words be spoken of a company. So I've seen some pretty dramatic failures as well, which I learned from, and understanding really where are you solving the market need, and then moved on from there to SnapApp, which I helped found, and we were able to bring the company from idea to market in 4 months. And happy to say that they were just funded for 10 million. So they continue to be a kind of ongoing entity. And looking across the table and saying, you realize I have no healthcare experience whatsoever. And they said, yeah, we're hiring you because you're a freak. And in the most positive, loving way, but really for the ability to understand market needs and really drive solutions to market fast. So we're going to get into some of that detail today. The title of the presentation kind of speaks volumes, I think, around market strategy tends to be one of those amorphous, big thinking ideas, and if you have an MBA, they have classic things like Porter's 5 Forces, SWOTs, business plans, marketing plans. But, I akin this presentation to almost Tim Ferriss's, marketing version of tools for Titans, or market strategy for tools for Titans, if any of you know that as a book. But my objective and hope out of this is just to trigger that one idea, that one framework, that one way that really changes, your thinking around, market strategy. And that would be a meaningful outcome for me, from this, is that, you do find that one thing that makes a dramatic change in the way you think. Just to give you an idea of the Fusion team. So we've been in existence in Optum for 4 years, and I'll get into some of the details of my experiences, but we work across the enterprise, and we're an accelerator. And, what we do is we do accelerate business strategies. We accelerate experiences in bringing prototypes to market really fast. And then finally, development as well through, engaging in what we call a fusion session. And it's generally 2 days in which we run people through a lot of the things that you're going to see here. And that's really our special sauce, is coupling together frameworks for great outcomes. So just to dig in a little bit here, when I think about market strategy, to me, it's not really a market strategy. It's a human strategy. It's a value strategy. What value can you create, for people, for human, lives, finding their needs, finding great ways to actually solve that need, and creating great experiences. So, really looking to understand, finding those opportunities, building experiences and delivering them, and then, repeating that too, as almost as fast as possible. And we'll get into some of that. I don't know if any of you have Alexa or Google Home. I just got my Alexa last night, and was blown away. Almost as if they were doing ethnographic research on me. So if you're in my home, I'm constantly cursing Siri, because it doesn't actually do what I need it to do when I ask it a question. I was just fascinated by my experience with Alexa. Alexa, what is the weather like today? How long is my commute? So they really, Amazon really understood me. They found opportunities to change my experience and deliver more than I expected. And if we look back on, something like the iPhone, same thing. It's kind of the unmet need. But, when I think about market strategy, this is the way I think about it at a fundamental level. I also think about, what's your system? And again, this hopefully triggers some ideas, for you, everything from, who's your tribe, who are your 1,000 people you're trying to create value for, because it goes from, 1 to 100 to 1,000 to 1 million people potentially in your market. What's the root pain you're solving for? What are the needs? How can you go to market super fast? Thinking about the ecosystem you're creating, and then some, personal attributes, that we really need to carry, in our hearts and in our minds too, that really drive, great solutions to market. So we're going to hit on, these topics. One of the things, and if you look at each one of these slides, I actually have deep content behind it, deep links as well. Things like 1,000 True Fans is a great article that really identifies creating value for 1,000 people and who your fans are, who your tribe is. But is it if you think about your tribe, who is it? Is it marketers? Is it developers? Is it healthcare professionals? Is it patients? So really identifying that and declaring something that you truly believe in, some change you can make in the marketplace. And leading that, effort. Seth Godin really talks about making a ruckus. So, finding that true need and really become a leader, but, having that kind of, 1 degree shift of thinking as well and how you think about the marketplace. And, in some cases, either leading from the top and creating a startup or leading from the bottom in a Fortune, in my case, it's a Fortune 6 company, 200,000 people. So how do I make an impact on a company this big? And, when you look at the, the diagram just above there, we started Fusion in 2014. And, my goal was to change the company. So we went from, a few believers to, 40 believers in 2014. And now we've impacted over 2,000 people and held Fusion sessions with over 2,000 people in the company. So really, making a dent, not only in the company, but in healthcare as well, and getting, great solutions to market. But, the point is to identify your tribe, either in the company, outside the company, who your market is. And if you think about, folks like, CrossFit, or Apple, really identifying who your tribe is and potentially leveraging, Simon Sinek's, why, how, what, why are we doing what we're doing? But really identifying that tribe and where you want to make a change. And then once you've done that, really looking at the pains. There's a famous VC quote, are you selling aspirins or vitamins? And I truly believe in that, because that's where, if you sell against pain, or, deliver on a pain, you're going to have a successful solution. And, I have a great example or story of this, in my company. If you think about a market need, the CDC says, 1 in 3 Americans are obese, and 1 in 3 Americans are overweight. That's a huge opportunity, not only to impact, the healthcare of people, but a huge market opportunity, as well. And you think as if we use traditional approaches as a healthcare company, you could create this cool app and, send someone a scale to measure their weight and, track that and, give them tips and tools. Well, you'd be dead wrong, actually. And I know this because we actually did, we went out and did ethnographic research. We went out and talked to, consumers, and what their challenges were, and, just learned tremendous things. The thing about, weight loss, it's not about weight loss. It's actually, the mom that we interviewed had a playground, swing set and slide in her backyard. And what was most important to her is being there with her kids, feeling strong, feeling healthy. So it had less to do with her weight than anything. And in fact, she said to us explicitly, I hate my scale. I can't get on it. But that's developing, talking to folks, synthesizing, observing them, getting, truly empathetic with where their deep pains are. And you can see the image there. That's really about a journey, and a patient's or someone who's looking to, improve their life in different ways, what their journey is. So the result of really talking and doing that ethnographic research, understanding the pain, we actually came out with a coaching application, and they could experiment with different things, whether it be their eating habits, going for a walk, they could choose their coach. But we actually put that concept together in 4 weeks, leveraging some of the frameworks that you'll see in just a moment here. But, we're able to test it with consumers, super rapidly, to get feedback to make those adjustments. And then this is another great framework that we leverage. It's the story behind this, if you haven't leveraged it, is again going at what is the the deep need. And it's Clayton Christensen. If you don't know Clayton, he's a Harvard business professor, and he has this idea of what is your product hired to do. And I was lucky enough at Intuit to get kind of a manuscript of the Innovators Solution, the Innovators Dilemma, right off the press. And one of the stories that he had originally in the book was he was hired by a fast food restaurant to go understand they were going to launch, one of 5 breakfast sandwiches, but they wanted his, consultation around which one they should actually launch. And he said, great, let me just go talk to consumers in the morning, see what they're doing, and really understand what they're looking to achieve. So the end result of that was, Clayton went in and saw 40% of the people were actually ordering milkshakes. And when he spoke with folks, he asked them the question, why did you hire that milkshake? Which to me is a super weird question. But what it does is shift someone's, thinking 1 degree. And the reasons they told him were, hey, I have a 45-minute commute. The milkshake lasts that long, keeps me entertained. And if I have kids in the back, I can hand it to them and they're quiet for the whole ride. And it fits perfectly in my cup holder in my SUV. If you listen kind of to those responses, that's the reason, folks hired a milkshake. So that, end result of that story is the, fast food restaurants came up with breakfast smoothies, and they were a tremendous hit. So again, that 1 degree degree in shift in thinking resulted in something dramatic that actually met the pains, customers well understood, and met the market need. And we actually do this in every fusion session, and it yields tremendous results around, why what job someone's hiring you to do. And we always connect empathy to it as well. And you can see there the emotional aspects of why someone would hire you, the functional aspects as well. So really less about, what features are of the product, but what kind of emotional need you're, meeting, but also functional need as well. And then this is a,
sorry,
go ahead.
We just had a question come in from Boudrot, and they ask, what do you mean by synthesizing with people?
Yeah, so that's a topic that we've actually broached quite heavily, and I can send links out after this. But an example of synthesizing information, I recently did this with we did interviews with local care entities, and what we would do is would interview people, and so we interviewed in this case 15 people. And what we're looking for is patterns within the interviews, not necessarily what they said, but what's essentially between the lines. And an example, of that would be synthesis. So it could be brain, we call it brain mapping, but a synthesis of, a multitude of points might result in, something like, the providers, this was a synthesis point now that I'm thinking about it, the providers are, they'll say things, they'll say, we're busy, we have to stay, in the office later, because we have to do, so much, entry. And we listen to that. And they'll also say, a little bit later on, all I want is time with my family. So the synthesis of those, and I'm kind of drawing from memory here, but the synthesis of those comments are, we need to actually give, providers or doctors, more time. So synthesizing at that level actually results in, you could look at jobs, the slide we're on now, and say, physicians are hiring us to, find more time in their day to be with their families. And that actually gets at that emotional, relevance as well. So they're not hiring us to, input to an EMR faster. That would be a function. They're hiring us so that they can get to their home to their family to take care of their family. So anyway, that's a little kind of snippet of synthesis. And then, one of the things we really think about, this is called the first mile. And this is, if you want to take a look at this, it's by a local Boston company here, Insight. And I think it's a phenomenal way to think about, as you understand the needs of your market, understand that deep pain, starting to think about what you could potentially do through jobs. They really ask three fundamental questions. And it's, is there a true need? Can you deliver on that need? And is it worth it? But the way I think about this is really about experimentation as well. So it's super interesting. If you look at the right-hand side where the enumeration is, and also the if you don't know if there's a need, conduct some desktop research, go out there and, dream it up, put it on the back of an envelope. So this would be in the early stages, of experimentation, but as you progress, so as you go to, is it shown, is it used, is it purchased? And, the purchase part is interesting because you start to go into, the prototyping stages. So we leverage this all the time in Fusion to assess, where people are, are in the stages of an idea, or the stages, within market. One of the things, within market is, is it, is there a need? Is it a repeated need? Have you found the adoption curve? And it gets to the edge of, that operational pilot in terms of, as you move to market maturity, then you start to find, advocates. It's scalable, and then it results in a profitable business. So just a super interesting way to think about early stage ideas and where you are and how to progress those ideas, or if you're heading towards, prototype or in-market pilots, how do you get to, advocated, scaled, and into a profitable business? One of the things we always think about in Fusion when we have a new idea come at us is, can you prototype it? And a lot of people will say to us, don't you mean prototype? And we say, no, it's prototyping. And it relates to the first mile a little bit, but, one of the classic cases of prototyping is, put a Google ad out there, with no product just to see what the response is. And it could be a coming soon, but just to gauge the messaging, the click through, the potential of the product. It's interesting because we, you could say this a little bit beyond prototyping and moving towards prototyping, but we were working with some physicians, some doctors, and went through a Google Sprint methodology, which means we were finding moments that we could solve a deep pain for them. And after going through journey mapping, which we hit on, or experience mapping, which we hit on just a moment ago, one of the most interesting things came out in speaking with them, and they said our biggest need is when we're walking from our office to the patient's room. It's complete downtime. There's nothing happening. So what we did is we ran a paper, we called it a paper prototype, but we prototyped on paper a Google Glass experience that actually fed the physician information during their walk from their office to the patient's room, and it fed details about Mary, who was experiencing a cough, and a little bit of her history the last time she was in. But then it both changed not only the doctor's experience, that he had a preview of what he was walking into, but it changed the patient experience as well. In that Dr. Spivak knew exactly Mary and what she was experiencing. But again, it's the idea of, even before you have a solution, why not do it super fast and test it? And there's some results on in terms of you can try much more ideas. You have faster experiments. I actually don't like the word failure. Faster experiments, and then higher level of successes as well. And there's a super this is the they call it the Pretotyping manifest, but there's great kind of ideas in that as well. It's like innovators beat just ideas, now beats later. Scarcity will bring clarity. Data beats opinions. So as you're prototyping, there's great dimensions to think of, but again, getting that market feedback as soon as possible to make sure you're finding that pain, you're finding the solution to that pain, and the job you're hired for, you're fulfilling. So this is all kind of connected. One of the things I think I won't spend much time on this classic business canvas. Super way to go fast to think about. Instead of creating a business strategy, market strategy, this is a super way to test, and put down on paper your ideas. And it's interesting when we hold a fusion session with constituents. Sometimes we'll hear, we'll create the conversation around, who is your customer? And in the case of healthcare, it's super complex. So it makes people think about the multitude of layers around, is it a patient? Is it a provider? Is it, someone that we're serving, in the front office or back office? But really starts to create that interconnectivity, of your ecosystem, creating value proposition for, your potential solution once you've done all of the groundwork around, the pains of the market, et cetera. But kind of a really great way to think about your ecosystem. And then one of the things that, we discovered in this journey of fusion is one thing called the 10 types of innovation. This actually is one of the most powerful, frameworks that we've seen around, how do you differentiate yourself in a marketplace? So once you've tested that need, once your experiments have been a success, how do you actually compete in the marketplace? And one of the there's a multitude of examples that you could run through this methodology, but Uber comes to mind around how they changed the experience in the marketplace. So instead of waiting for a cab, I can leverage part of their offering or product is an app. So all of a sudden you can see the interconnectivity. Not only they're providing a different experience within the marketplace, they have an app or a product that actually enables that experience. But then if you go a little deeper into the configuration, the left-hand side there, they actually totally changed their a network. So they found a true platform in, the availability of, everyday folks with cars became, part of their service. So, and you can run a multitude of companies through this. Think about, Apple and iTunes and their platform. That's their offering. They totally changed the music buying experience, and then really, partnered with their network and created a different profit model in the industry. So super powerful way to, think about differentiating your offering. So if you've, found that market need, you found your solution, that's your offering, but how does that create a different experience than exists today in the marketplace? And then, what configuration, what is your business model? How can you change that in order to serve kind of that holistic product mindset? We can actually leverage this for the competition as well to find holes that you may be able to fill as well. So again, one of the most powerful frameworks, that we've leveraged in Fusion and I've seen in, across my experience. And then, I think super important as well is, what we do, hopefully we're starting to establish a tribe here. But, folks, that are on the phone today, the fact that you're doing this, you have persistence, but it's refusing to give up. And, part of that is creating, that vision, and, belief, in adjusting and adapting on that as well. I mean, I remember, not only in the startups I've been in, but here at Fusion, I'll constantly walk up to folks, on the team and say, do you believe in Fusion? And it's kind of a weird question to ask your own team, but, it's part of become part of a cult in the company as well. So I really want, we've created a, fabulous vision to, change, the way the company operates. But we're adjusting constantly, learning constantly. What we'll do is we'll, look at a framework like 10 types of innovation or Google Sprint. We'll completely deconstruct it and we'll reconstruct that and drive teams, through that. But that's the, adjustment and adaptation that we're constantly going through. One of the things I was recently listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. I found this, you can find a bunch of confident people, where we work, where you work. But what really drives things is having the courage, and that courage to, do some of the things that we talked about, going to talk to customers, doing ethnographic research, trying different models or frameworks that, will change the way you think. It'll change the way, others think, but it's really that application, and driving people through. And, hey, it's a little bit of a risk as well. We're risking, someone won't, believe us. Someone won't, understand it, but really driving, not only, frameworks, but solutions to market as well, and having that courage. There's a great book by Angela Duckworth, called Grit. One of the things she talks about is, talent times effort equals skill, skill times effort equals achievement. So it really gets to that, the courage as well. And she has a great story. How do you teach grit as a parent? And one of the theories there is, a child in school, being complimented around a grade. So, one method is saying, hey, it's great that you got that A. That just results in a compliment. But if you say, hey, you really worked hard for that A, that equates, hard work with achievement of that grade. So if someone gets a B, it's like you worked really hard, and the harder you work, you're going to get an A. So it's having that true grit, that true kind of work ethic, to achieve. So skill times effort equals achievement. So, my hope is that you learn at least one thing, out of this today, and I want you to go build, cool things, cool experiences, that change the world, change people's experiences, and this is another model that I always think of to end kind of the webinar in a way and open it up to questions. But, we have a theory in Fusion. It's always yes and. is a method we always think of, but, we can if might be a great way to end this with open questions. If you're struggling in your efforts, we can if we substitute X for Y. We can if we resource through a partnership. We can if we fund it by alternative sources. But really just wanted to open up this as a point of questioning and ideation, but really create that yes and then call to action here is be happy to send the presentation, or Sandra will be sending the presentation out. Become part of my tribe. And one of the experiments I'd love to try with you today is text me your NPS score. Tell me what you thought of this webinar. So I'd love to open it up for questions.
Great, Ed, thank you so much. That was great. While questions pour in, I'm going to pose one for you. But to all of our folks who have dialed in, please send your questions. They can be as broad or as specific as you'd like, and Ed will do his best to give you some insights to them. And while those come in, Ed, I'm wondering if you can talk about either in Fusion or in your prior to Optum, some of the biggest challenges that you see facing startups, or major themes that you see throughout this process that entrepreneurs and people trying to make it find themselves facing.
Yes, I think I've seen it in startups, and I've seen it in enterprises as well. And it's going to sound simple, but it is lack of strategy. But I'll drill down a little bit on that. It's I've heard a ton of product managers say that I don't have enough time to talk to customers. I can't talk to my customers. I really think one of the Achilles heels is doing that foundational, ethnographic research. There's another great resource out there called 101 Designs. And again, I can send links to all of this, but that really speaks to, doing the appropriate, industry research, market research, and different methods of doing that. Then, I do use the word synthesize a lot, but what's your synthesis of that? Solution to market, but then it's going to test that hypothesis with going to talk to folks who represent that target market, that you're really trying to understand. And that's where the gold is really understanding that true need and formulating a potential approach, to market with whatever solution you're looking for, and testing that rapidly. And then, finding again that a way to meet that pain through, why people are hiring you. So when I say, I've seen startups start up and think they have a great idea for a solution, and they actually waste time and they waste effort, finding their path because they haven't done that foundational, work in the beginning. And I've seen that in enterprises as well. I saw it at Intuit. And they had a product seeking a market, which is a really bad place to be. So what I did in that case is I actually went out. I called it the Why Not Buy initiative. So I went out and I spoke with customers who came in. They checked the product out and they chose not to buy it. But that's a great example of doing ethnographic research with what's available to you, and then synthesizing that. And the reason they didn't buy in that case was we hadn't packaged the product for their particular need. So the job they're hiring us for, we didn't fulfill it.
Great, thank you for that. Again, just one more call for questions. Please send them in through the chat here. And in the meantime, Ed, I'll take advantage and ask another question. Looking back over your career and what you've gone through, what piece of advice do you wish you had at the beginning, or what piece of advice would you give to those starting out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it took my my whole career to realize that reading a book, looking at a framework, talking about it isn't enough, that you need to take your learning and convert it into, something actionable. So, an example would be, if you look at the blue ocean strategy, how can you take that and make it actionable, or the 10 types of innovation, and, make that actionable. So I think, and I do this myself, and I have to catch myself, and we have a kind of a way we think in Fusion is there is a spectrum of thinking and doing. So you can think, but you better have kind of, actionable, I call them work products from, your great thinking, and that can translate into, doing. But, what we've done in Fusion here is do that. And that's how we've been able to, deliver great solutions to market much faster, is translating thinking into really fast doing.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a question that came in from Siddharth, who's in India. And they ask, how do you move ahead if your solution to the problem is executable, but you find yourself external to the system? We are currently facing this issue as our problem is acknowledged and the solution is implementable, but it would involve adoption in the current process, and that is getting a lot of resistance as utilizing the solution is far greater good of people, but does very little to the profitability of the organization it caters to.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty deep question. So, I think. I'm sorry.
Saying and thank you for it. We're glad to have it. And
oh, absolutely. That's a great question, and I think part of what I heard in that is a few things. Like I heard adoption might be an issue, and so there's a few things. One is and it goes to finding your tribe. So or you could look at that as finding a lead customer as well. Crossing the chasm came to mind. Someone, if it does have that true inherent value and solves a pain, you just need to find the right person or company to adopt it, because they can actually see the long-term value, not the short-term value. I think short-term value is to me profit. Long-term value is creating value for a marketplace. So I think it's easy to say, right? Because it sounds like you've been at this for a while. If you've built the solution, so part of it is finding that lead customer. I think the other side is take a look at the 10 types of innovation, because when I heard the question, I thought, wow, they actually have an offering, which means you're creating value in that spectrum, and you might not have this side of the equation, which is configuration, which is, who are your partners, what does the profit model, look like, in the long run. So that is something super important to think about, is, not only how do you make money, but how does the, folks you serve make money. And I guess what it brings to mind too is this concept of objective and key results. So everything's not about money, but it's about, what key results can you, deliver on. So it could be, I don't know the exact solution clearly, but it could be shortened sales cycle, which you could put a monetary value on. You could, a better, a much more improved customer experience. So look to put, what are the key results from that? So again, just everything's not about money. It's about how you can actually position your solution in what key result can you deliver?
yeah, I think that's great, Ed. And I think, said another way, and Siddharth, thanks you as well. You really have to find almost your visionaries and change agents. You could have the same conversation with two different people in the same type of role. One has that vision with you, kind of is a change agent and ready to go with you, and one might not have that same sort of perspective, and that can be a lot of work to seek out those agents of change. But they really are critical to making things happen, especially when you're challenging status quo.
Yeah, I love that. In my, last startup, we, had a concept, and we were looking for folks to test it in the marketplace, but we did exactly as, you're suggesting. We found the champions, we found the innovators, and, we trialed it, and our plan was to trial it for free and create those value statements, but then, move quickly towards, monetization. So.
That's great. Well, I think that's all we have coming in. So Ed, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all these insights with us and our network here. I think it's really useful information and really helpful to our team expanded across the globe here that have joined us for this. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I'm so grateful to take the time today. So thank you. Great,
and thank you all for joining. And as Ed said, we'll be able to distribute these slides. And Ed, if okay with you, we can also post this has been recorded, and we can post that on our platform where people are able to access it in the future.
Perfect.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all. Have a good day.